just clarified so many different things, because I've been so grateful for the work that has happened in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And when I hear people say, we haven't made any progress, it's the same, I'm like, no, this is completely different now. Similar threads, but this is new. This is new territory. But I love the way that you framed that, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
There's a global transformation of consciousness happening right now, and you are a part of it. It's the greatest shift in consciousness this planet has ever seen. And my assignment, my mission, is to help you awaken to the infinite nature of your being, love. I help awakening people actualize their spirituality. I see what's there, what's really there, and I share those insights with you. My journey isn't mine, my struggles, my pain. It's all for this moment, for this time, for this place, for us, so that we can come together and reconnect as one, layers of one universe living as we ought. Inspired, intrigued, interconnected, intersectional. Spiritual awakening is just the beginning. Spiritual actualization is the evolution. I am Will Rucker, and this is Spiritual Actualization. Let's get into it.
I grew up in a Christian family.
Okay.
My family has about 8 churches. Yeah. I come from a family of orders, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even top 10. Like it's amazing to witness really at scale what that looks like. I've had the privilege to have studied and read the Bible probably 4 or 5 times now, completely. I've had the privilege of reading a number of Buddhist texts, reading Hindu doctrines, reading the Vedas, Tao Te Ching, Confucianism, reading the Torah, reading the Quran. I've been incredibly lucky to not only have read those things, but to have had access to people who could help me venture through those topics. Yeah. Even going back to undergrad, a good friend of mine, Sherman Coleman, he is a pastor himself, and kudos to him for letting me be his friend. I'm incredibly critical. I believe that historical context matters. I believe that language matters, and therefore older versions of something are important in terms of understanding newer contexts for language. Mm-hmm. When people say an age, for instance, in the Bible, when the word age is used, older version would have been eon. Eon is a specific number of years. That's the context that I believe is important, regardless of what the outcomes are from it, just for my own peace of mind. So no, I wouldn't necessarily claim any particular religion, but I would definitely irrefutably say that I believe, though, regardless of the religion, it's hard for me to believe that someone believes in practicing closeness to God and simultaneously practices things that divide them from fellow man.
Okay, that's another podcast.
It's just hard for me to imagine that. So going back to the question around, how do we, that compassion for these officers and the symptoms that we can witness in them, we have to ask, what are the results of the culture of that particular space? I grew up in a gang neighborhood, grew up in gang neighborhoods. Those are good people, overwhelmingly. Yeah. Period. There's no qualifiers around it. People who looked out for me, people who saved me. Mm-hmm. And simultaneously, a lot of those older heads, a lot of those OGs will sit and say, when they live long enough to reflect long enough, can say, the cost was high. And in some instances, I went different, meaning away from the gang life. In some instances, it's continue the gang life, but just do it better. Nipsey Hussle is an example of that. When we talk about somebody who said, the gang isn't actually the issue. What we do with it. Because Crips, the original meaning of the Crips was community revolutionaries in progress.
Really?
Yeah. And the guy who wrote the Constitution for the Crips, which is crazy to think, but they had a Constitution. His references were not arbitrary, They were invited to, if I remember correctly, the mayor of Los Angeles' home as an organization because they're recognized as being an organization. But circumstances for anybody can shift intentions to a place of practices that are not necessarily in the original alignment.
Yeah.
It takes work to look at that, honestly. When we look at policing in this country in the way that we know it, we have to ask, where does it come from? What have been those practices? Are they still common practices today? And the reason why I emphasize the practice part is because if you can't look at that honestly, it's really hard for me to look at you and say, I'm going to give you the space to only be looked at for your intention. Because what you're doing is you're skirting accountability. My mom is a parent. She was a single mom, raised my sister and I was a twin. I was supposed to be two males. Mm-hmm. So we were twins to make it. She was going to raise two black boys in the city of Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. As far as stereotypes go, the neighborhood was very similar, very in alignment. I could say, as many of us can look at our parents and say, I know that any parent is always doing their best and will measure themselves to their previous parent and have clear indicators for why they're better. But it doesn't change the fact that there are consequences and there's healing that I might need to do regardless of my mom's practice.
Yeah.
Right? I use my mom as an example. My mom gave me ample room, but there are plenty of parents who have had consequences on their kids and then ask their kids to only consider their intentions because they're measuring it to what their parents were. Mm-hmm. But the kid is saying, but I'm still healing. And I don't even know how to heal. But you asking me to give you a pass? I don't even have the space within myself to have the pass. I'm still learning how to give myself grace. And so when I say that people have to play their role, and I hope this isn't convoluted, but when I say that people have to play their role, what I mean is that there are people who they are purely going to say, you are accountable for the results. Mm-hmm. I don't care at all about your intentions.
Yeah.
That's important. Because those are people who hold people to the fire when they're looking for that comfort and room. And if you're part of a privileged group, whatever form of power and privilege that comes in, you already have the room. So you do not have the place, I would say, to ask for it. Because that ask is an ask of compassion. And I would say if you're already in a position to recognize that you're there, practice the compassion at length. That's not easy. Mm-hmm. I can't emphasize how non-easy this work is, you know? But if you're an officer, you have the training, you have the weapons, you have the law, and you have the precedence that's been set by the law, by the training, by the practice, by the culture. Why are you the person asking when you're already equipped with so much, asking other people to say, give me room? It's like you already have it.
Yeah.
And on a personal level, I can look at that and go, but I don't mind practicing that room. Mm-hmm. But it's never at the cost of the accountability.
I want you to know that's a lot.
Yeah, you know, I'm conscious of that. You know, like I'm trying to be very clear and plain.
Yeah.
But it is a lot, though.
You stated it in a way that's accessible, but it's such a big concept that, I mean, we could spend all day talking about that. I do want to transition, though, to something that's related, which is history, and how that affects how we see what's happening in our present.
So I'll be as simple and spark-noty as possible.
Okay.
I'll say the following. One, when you find yourself saying no to something before you truly understand something, ask yourself why. When you find yourself saying no to something after a brief bit of research, or what you may call research, which could be passively receiving information, could you just scroll down whatever people you happen to follow already? Ask yourself, is it possible that I could be wrong? I think this applies to both sides, period. Or whatever sides, the multitude of sides that could exist. And then 3, when we're asking someone to give, ask what have they already given up? Because it's very similar to people I know who have claimed to believe in Christ, for instance. Mm-hmm. And if you've practiced that, if you've read the New Testament, and interpretation could be those who are practitioners really do incur a great deal. But in incurring a great deal, such as, Saul became Paul, what you're incurring is liberation. So you have greater room. You've incurred, but you've incurred freedom. If you are someone who claims to have that freedom, why would you then put the onus on someone else to incur greater than the freedom you actually have? You recognize, if you really genuinely, without judgment, can say, oh, if you even with the arrogance that might come out of it, I don't think this person is free. So why are you demanding so much? You have to understand what it's like to not be free. Yeah. Oh, you think you fell on the right side of history or of practices, so the ego can tell you, I got it. You've forgotten. That's not compassion. That's ego and that's judgment. That's challenging. But to ask the question, what place am I operating from? But once again, though, if you haven't done the work to study yourself, to ask people around you, who am I? Because our own ideas of who we are not to be determined by other people, but can be given context. Like you said, like when you and you haven't gone that line of thought. Please, I hope you haven't forgotten the question. But the historical point of view, there's things that I've gone back to my mom, my aunties, my uncles when I was a kid, and I asked them, how was I? And they gave me context to understand. I'm like, oh, this ain't new. A lot of these tendencies, my auntie Shirley the other day said, when you was a kid, you would sit with me for 30 minutes and just ask questions. I was like that as a kid. So I can recognize, oh, this isn't a new practice. And they had the wherewithal to give me the freedom to venture into places that might not arrive to where they agreed with. But they gave me the space to venture. For me, that was liberating. For others, it's haunting. Yeah. And so I think people have to ask themselves those difficult questions. What is your intention? What is the space you're operating from? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Have you done the work to even figure that out? Well, don't posture in front of me and act like you really are revolutionary in your practices, that you're deserving of being, that I'm supposed to view as being gracious, when personally you don't practice grace within yourself. Or even more so. And I can't determine that for another person, so I don't bother. But the courage it takes to admit that within ourselves is revolutionary at scale. And our greatest relationships, I would imagine, tend to be relationships that are rooted in practices of honesty and fearlessness. And when you can only be fearless if you face fear, that's everything. I chose my wife. I can practice that with my wife. Even when I'm not as courageous as I want to be, I can lean in. But that practice allows me to then go to my mom and practice that. That allows me to practice, to be in this conversation and practice that, not the other way around.
I think that space of honesty is really where I hope to see us as a nation get to, because I don't think we're there yet. I think we have a long road to get there. I know we're making progress, but to really look at ourselves and accept, like, we have work to do still, individual work, let alone the collective.
Trevor Noah said, when he talked about South Africa and their reconciliation, the peace and reconciliation, it's important that conjunction is combined, because it's not peace in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. It's peace and reconciliation, because peace is not sustainable even on the front end if reconciliation doesn't actually take place. You have to give people room at some point to really put all of their woes, all of their worsts on the table. If they can't put it on the table, then they keep it in their pocket. Right. If they keep it in their pocket, it's always able to be withdrawn.
So I've got to ask this, then we'll get to the other question.
I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. But with the PC police that we have now, the cancel culture, the unforgiveness that people just hold on to, any mistake a company makes, a person makes, they can't change course. Like Starbucks, I got a lot of flack today because they just did it because they were losing money. I'm like, first of all, it's been a day, so they haven't actually lost money.
Right.
But they also have made mistakes before and taken efforts to correct it. Are we supposed to hold them to their previous mistakes, or can they be honest and say, you know what, we thought this was a good policy, clearly we were wrong, and now change course? So what do you think about that?
I think we're in the first time that conversation is even able to be held at scale, because it's the first time where everyone virtually, regardless of scale, has a platform. And so what we're witnessing is, for the first time, we can look at not the resume of Starbucks, but the credit score of Starbucks, meaning the history in its entirety, and say, what have been the practices? The challenge is, though, if the response is always, well, cancel them, do we then miss an opportunity, even from a company perspective, to have the conversation? I think that it's fitting. I think Jay-Z described it well with this New York Times interview with Donald Sterling, the owner of the Clippers. When you just fire him, he pays a couple fines or whatever. I'm not quite sure he was for sure removed from his position. Is then everyone else who's watching goes back into hiding. And so you take a victory, but it's a bit hollow. Yeah. Not completely, but it is a bit hollow, because the question becomes, what is the real change we're seeking?
Yeah. I say you won the battle but lost the war.
Right. When people have asked for equality on any scale, or civility in any scale, what we're talking about is a cultural shift. What we're talking about is, let us be protected by the law so then we can go into the streets and then begin to advocate for ourselves, knowing we're protected, to have the more important conversation that has to take place.
I love that framing. That for me just clarified so many different things, because I've been so grateful for the work that has happened in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And when I hear people say, we haven't made any progress, it's the same. I'm like, no, this is completely different now. Similar threads, but this is new. This is new territory. But I love the way that you framed that, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I have no interest in living in my grandparents' time when they were kids, because I can honestly look at that and say, that wasn't a come up. I mean, there was costs that they incurred. There were things that they had to live through and experience. I mean, at best, the shades that I can understand are pale.
Yeah.
And I'm honest about that. And yet I can still say, but there's commonality.
Mm-hmm.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
That's the harder part. It's hard to say, well, dang, it's changed, and yet it's so much the same. But how many of us are like that?
Yeah.
How many of us have changed and grown, and yet are still in some way? I have habits that go back to when I was a child.
Yeah. Some
of them I stand by. And some of them I go, ooh, you got some letting go to do. Mm-hmm. They're not in pockets. They're not in vacuums. They're not in cups that you can put on the shelf. They're not. They just are.
Yeah.
And we have to reconcile through that. A lot of the young students that I've taught between 16 and 22, a lot of them have been asking, well, I'm frustrated, I'm upset. I'm like, that's true. But what do you know? Mm-hmm. You're critical of the past, but you don't have a context for it. You haven't done that work. You're asking people to see you, and yet you don't even see yourself. You don't even know how you arrived here. Now, in a truly public, at that national level, that sounds like, well, why are you holding them accountable? But the truth is, I actually don't even hold them accountable to that. I give them food for thought. I hold myself and my generation accountable for not giving them greater answers and greater education. Why don't they know better? Why don't they know the context? Why don't they know the nuances? Why don't they know about Tulsa and Stonewall? Why don't they know about the spectrum of things that have taken place across communities?
Right.
Why? That's not their fault. That's not their fault. That's just not. And I'm not mad at them for that.
And it's hard to hear that and to own it and accept that, because then I don't know if it's our ego or insecurities, and sometimes that's the same thing.
It's hard to distinguish.
Yeah. But that then boils over, because if I say I failed this person, then I can't necessarily hold them accountable until I've held myself accountable. And that's uncomfortable.
Indeed.
Because we want to feel like we've done well. And one of my many new things is telling people, stop saying you're not perfect. You are perfect. You are not inherently flawed.
Right.
Like, stop claiming that. Yes, you do have room to grow and to heal and all of these things, but you're perfect. So operate from that space, because then you can hear a critique and get better. I'm an artist by nature. I spent years in theater and music and all of that. And the thing I wanted, I enjoyed the rave reviews, like, don't get me wrong. But what I wanted was my coach to tell me after, but when you hit that note, notice your palate was down. That's why you got tired. Give me the things that are going to take me to the next level.
Right.
Not just pat me on the back for the good.
You can be perfect and still be better.
That's right.
I think that children are perhaps our greatest example of that. I can look at a child learning to walk and go, wow, it's still becoming, but look at all of this. Just that simple.
And I use children as the example because any new parent, any new uncle, aunt, cousin, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so perfect. And even with puppies and kittens and things, they're like, this is perfect. And they're pooping and biting you and, throwing up on you. You take the diaper off, they pee. Like, all of these things that are gross, but yet we have unconditional love for them.
I would argue that it's actually not unconditional. That's why it changes. It's very conditional. And so the conditional nature of it is, as long as you're this, you're perfect. As soon as you move away from that, you're not. It sounds absurd to look at a baby trying to learn how to walk and seeing it fall and going, that's a flaw. When we understand that's the nature of it becoming.
Right.
Learning how to walk, that's a required process. More so than just an inconvenient one. It's a required and necessary one. Learn your body, little baby. Go through your process. I ain't even mad at you. Look at you. If anything, look at you. I see you. Look at you. The perseverance. Sometimes they fall, they cry. Sometimes they fall, they laugh, they giggle. Sometimes they fall and it's just nothing. They just look around like, was that really it? I try. I don't know what's going through their head, but we give them the room. And then there's a point where we start to stop giving ourselves that room. We start to believe in the stories we've told ourselves that we're supposed to have it figured out. That's trash. No one's had it figured out.
So can we extend that same grace to the officers that murdered George Floyd?
Man, I extend the grace to everybody. I'm not mad at anyone. Honestly, on a personal level, I'm not mad at anybody because everyone's operating from where they're operating. I extend the grace to the officers, and they still are accountable. They murdered a man. I mean, it's for y'all. It's just hard for me to think that he, handcuffed on the floor, face down, is more responsible than the officer who practiced it. And yet, I simultaneously can say, okay, that's the truth. That's not cool. What happened to you? How did you go from being a small child one day to becoming someone who says, I can passively watch that? Forget the officers kneeling. I can watch that.
I can be confronted by bystanders and nothing changed.
With a level of coolness. Whatever that is a problem. What happened to you? You didn't see this man as a whole human? Criminal or not, if that's what we're going to say constitutes someone not being given grace, this country has a much harder conversation with itself in its inception. If we're going to talk about criminality and grace. So we're going to extend grace. Let's keep it 100 through and through. In that scenario in particular, man, that's a whole, he got a family the whole night, but everyone involved is in that dynamic. But I'm not going to offer that. Actually, let me be clear. I'll offer that grace. And I simultaneously say, but my energy is going to be directed towards the masses of small kids, the masses of Black kids who have a father who looks like that, who have a mother who looks like Breonna Taylor. I'm looking at them and I'm going, dang, what scarring are you experiencing growing up where Black deaths are not merely normal, but they're both viral and leveraged as a means for people to say, doesn't matter. You grown, I give you that. I understand that. You lived a whole life. There's a reason you became this human. I look at the officers and I say that. I don't know the reasons, but I see you and I go, man, any of us could have become that. There's Black officers who've done that. There's white officers who've done that. There's a spectrum of people who've done that, who ain't even been officers, who've practiced that level of disconnect, I think about the children and I think, okay, well, if I give you a pass, the consequence trickles down for real, for real. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in you in that particular way. I see you, I feel for you.
So our posture, our heart, our intention can be restorative, and we can have true empathy and love and compassion for the officer.
Indeed.
And simultaneously, use your word, I love that, also know that if we don't erect some boundaries and some barriers here, then this entire group of people is now going to be scarred and impacted. And that's okay.
I mean, just think about it at scale. Because I think yes is the response to that. If I'm a kid growing up in today's context, where it's harder to control the narratives because they got their phones, the exposure, even from the context, like we talk about from the context of white privilege. If you're a white kid growing up, you're like, nah, this really just my homie. And you see your homie going through it, because you're like, dang, well, this month was this death. 3 months from now gonna be this death. A year from now gonna be this death. It's like, that don't even make, how do you even justify that? Why are your people always showing up as viral?
Yeah.
Why are your deaths a form of, I don't want to go as far as say entertainment, but it is eerily similar to lynchings, in the sense that, oh, it's mass gatherings. Oh, did you hear about this? Let's spread the word.
Right. So the gathering has moved from in person to virtual.
Right. And with that difference, though, has come people who could never have been at those gatherings because they would have been harmed in the process, who can now share it and be like, yo, catch word. This is what's going on. Mm-hmm. So it's not, or in some way, maybe that is progress, but the results are the same. Why are black deaths still something to be awed at?
So let's talk about this.
I appreciate the space you're giving me to really talk about all of these things in this way. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's an honor. Melinda Gates said that after first responders, Blacks should be the first to receive the vaccine for COVID-19. That was met with harsh criticism and with suspicion. And it felt like an echo of the past where Blacks were experimented on in medical settings. Whereas, and headlines, of course, now we don't actually read articles anymore. But if you go into the article, she said the person that needs it most is the person in the hospital setting that's dealing with this. Immediately following are the people that are most disproportionately affected, who are Black and brown people. So we need to vaccinate them next because they're most susceptible, and then trickle down. So she's actually in a position of, let's reverse this inequity. Let's fix what's wrong here.
Right.
And she's being eaten alive for it.
Right.
How do we heal as a people to get to the place where we can trust again, where we can believe in the goodness of others, where every attempt to help isn't automatically considered an act of aggression?
I think first we have to re-understand what faith really means. People think of faith as being some lofty, deeply, explicitly religious sort of practice. But when I sat in this chair, I didn't question it, whether or not it would hold me. When I'm driving on the freeway, I have faith that everyone is also going to operate under basic rules. That is an existing belief that I have, even when it's unfounded. I mean, that's faith at its finest, in a way. That even if I don't understand why all the time, I can't compute it to figure out exactly to justify to another human. I recognize, I have it.
Yeah.
When we're skeptical, are we operating from fear? I have no issue with skepticism. Skepticism is warranted. This country does have a unique history of experimenting on us. So I'm cool with people being like, nah, we gonna watch for a little bit. We're not gonna be first wave. Once again, I can't testify to the intentions, the practices of Melinda Gates outside of what I witnessed from her, what she offers. I can't. So I'm not interested in that. What I will say is, here's a concern to consider. Is there a way we can reconcile that? It is entirely too easy to be critical for critical sake when never actually being in the arena. So going back to Theodore Roosevelt's famous speech about the man in the arena, right? It's not the critic who counts. It's the man whose face has been marred by blood and sand who knows both victory and defeat, not the person who's watching in the stands. No statue has ever been erected for a critic. It's like looking at something like this. Someone could say, this could have been better. But it's like, but then how?
Right.
It's too easy to say could have been better, but not propose a how. For people who are critical, I would pose the question, and I think this is like an entry point to an answer. When you're critical, what have you offered aside from that? And it's not to say that the critique by itself isn't warranted, but it's also to say we just can't stop there. Because cynicism means nothingness takes place. Because it's too easy to be cynical about everything. Man, I'm not going to buy this food. I'm not going to go to the grocery store. I'm not going to drink this water. Like, it's too easy. There's too much evidence, especially on the internet, to corroborate any line of thought. So that can't be the answer. So when people are looking and are going, well, how do we know? We don't know. But if Melinda Gates is serious, and you've worked in your local space, because the national space is just, people are trying to hold people accountable to this federal level, this level of fame that's international. Nah, they're beyond your local sphere. You can't reach them. And even if you can, because we have the illusions of them being accessible because of the devices that we have, and in some instances that does take place, but the truth is there's no way to really verify that. How do you vet someone like Melinda Gates? How do you vet someone like Joe Biden? How do you vet someone like Donald Trump? I have no real answer for that. I don't know how to vet them. But what I do know is I can do the work to be skeptical, and I can propose ideas. I like the idea of, okay, give these to these doctors, these nurses, because you're not going to give it to them unless you believe on some level this is going to work. Secondary question can come up. How do you know it's the same vaccine? How do you know it's X, Y, and Z?
Right.
And really, on a personal level, I tell all the homies, if you're skeptical of the world of medicine, get involved in the world of medicine.
I love that. That's it. That's exactly it. If you think there's a problem there, then get in there and do something.
Right. Or raise a generation to go ahead and get involved in it.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's easier to be mad. It's easier to be cynical. It's easier to be critical than to actually think, what does this actually look like in practice? How do we skirt this? Look, my great-grandmother acquired a great deal of wealth. In her passing, the family...
Well, let me hold $20.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The family, her passing, the family lost a lot of that.
Okay.
What happened? There was a lack of passing of information that took place.
Yeah.
I understand there are systems that did not help at all in that process. And I recognize there was a ball that was dropped on our end. Once again, those are not mutually exclusive things. I'm fine with the fact that there can be nuance and messiness. On the spectrum of shades between black and white, there's far more gray than anything else. Most of us exist in that. no different in nature. The desert is an extreme climate. Why is it considered extreme? Because most temperatures ain't that. Most climates are not that. The Arctic, extreme cold.
Right.
Those are extremes, and those exist. And I recognize that. But we know that most on a bell curve, if things exist within a bell curve. So let's not get caught up. Because if you lose this middle, things become more extreme. And that's what we're witnessing. We're witnessing things losing the middle, the nuance. Man, if Melinda Gates is doing that, okay. Well, if you believe that there are people that you believe in, because Melinda Gates might not be the person you believe in. I don't know Melinda Gates. I might trust Beyonce more than I trust Melinda Gates. That's just on a superficial level. So what I'll do is I'm gonna go holler at Beyonce in whatever way I can and get all my people who I know to holler at Beyonce and be like, yo, look into this for us because we trust you. And then trust whoever she sends to go check Melinda Gates to be legitimate.
What you just described is representative government, really.
Indeed, yeah. We're in a representative republic, so let's not. But that's what makes this time so interesting. This is so new to everyone in existence right now. We discuss the social media norms and these weird, paradoxes of, oh, it's new and it's old. Right? Like these youngins, they're in a different world. We use the exact same tools that those young people were critiquing for using and act as if we're not subjugated to the same consequences that they're experiencing. It's a weird quandary of a paradox to be with them. With that being said, I think if I don't feel like I'm in a position to do something, I then go to people who I believe in. If I don't believe in them, and that's where I land, I'm going to do the work to become someone I can believe in. So it's not a giving up.
I'm sorry. I've become someone I believe. I love it. That's just love.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because it goes back to the medicine thing. If you're skeptical about the medicine world, get in that world. Or get people to, or maybe before that, encourage other people to get into that world. Or if you already know people in that world, holler at them, talk with them, figure it out, hold them accountable. If you don't get access to them, do the work to get access to someone else. If none of that is enough, get into that world yourself. Because ultimately, what's the intention? If you really need to know about this medicine world, if you can trust it, the answer can't be, well, I'm just not going to be involved completely. That is an answer. And if you're not involved, then also don't be upset when you're not in the know.
Right.
I live in the city of Henderson. They have a city council. Those people are more in the loop than I am about Goodman because they be in spaces where Goodman, Mayor Goodman actually resides. Yeah. Okay, but I might have access to people who actually have access to her, who have a more personal relationship to her. So I may not need to go through the people from the city council to get access to understanding her thought process because I trust these spaces and sources of people. And I trust that what you tell me is the truth.
What happens when that trust is compromised?
You leverage the systems that are in place to hold people accountable. Or you do the work to get into the position yourself, which is another way of leveraging systems to hold people accountable. We're going to get you out. Or you accept that there are truths that exist in the world, no different than the hot summer Vegas, and you adjust accordingly without any demands for the sun to not shine the way it does in this Vegas rally. Because it's a waste of time and it's futile to be upset at the sun for shining the way it does when we live in the desert. You got to figure out what level you want to engage on. And look, none of this, once again, none of this is convenient, none of this is easy, none of this is perhaps the much fitting word is fair. But that's not the point. It's not the point. It's not fair. Actually, a woman I know named Tanya, who works at Truro University, Black woman, PhD, swagged out, incredible. And she does a lot of restorative justice work.
And I need to know her.
Oh, yes, certainly. And she talks about how there's, I want to say, a West African community that when they see each other, the translation for what they greet to one another is, how are the children? It's not a question of how are you. The question is, how are the children? Because as an elder, the children aren't well. How dare you be well? Right? It's so beautiful and poetic in a way, and yet it's so like, ooh, you know? And so if I find myself dissatisfied by the status quo of the institutions or individuals that I'm witnessing, I can only then begin to advocate on behalf of the children. And the best way to advocate on behalf of the children is not just to stand there and talk for them, but find ways for them to be built up enough to talk for themselves, to prepare them to navigate differently. And that goes back to the idea. If I haven't proposed to them solutions, how can I be mad at their behavior? They're only going to operate under what they know to be an option. They've been taught that protest and protesting is the default way of creating change. We went through school. What other alternative were people really taught?
Right.
To advocate for change. Okay. So then why would I look at them with any reasonable expectation and go, why are you out here protesting for change? That's a waste of time. What else did I show them? I provided no alternatives to them. Nothing reasonable. I didn't sit down at length, sacrifice time and energy that could have been towards something else, towards saying, we're going to sit down every week or every month and we're going to learn. I didn't. I mean, as an educator, yeah, I did personally.
Right, yeah.
But that's a privilege that I had being an educator. At scale, man, most people just trying to feed their families. Make sure their partners ain't too mad at them. Make sure their kids aren't serial killers. That's really that's what most people really are at. And once again, and I hope it doesn't. Actually, I don't care what it sounds like. To me, it's not a cop-out because I see whole humans, and yet you held accountable. My conversation with Christine's held accountable. She got work that she needs to do. That conversation was clear. There's a lot of things that she just wasn't aware of. I mean, Christine is good people. Yeah. But it doesn't always mean, though, that she doesn't operate from a place of naivete, that there's not consequences from her own frame of reference. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. I'm naive to things.